we could start then talking about trading and swapping. I'm 30 years old, so for me, I was 9, 10 years old when, you know, Pokemon cards came into the school playground, and part of the magic of it for me, and I assume for many other kids, was the trade, you know, the art of the trade and swapping cards, which still seems to exist, but not quite in the same way. And I talk a little bit about a bad trade that I made where I swapped a Charizard for a Rhydon, because I'd never seen a jungle set Rhydon at that time, and to me it was amazing. Pretty bad, but wanted to sort of see if you had any stories, if you can remember going back to when you were younger. If there isn't anything from when you were younger, not a problem, or even more recent where you were able to either get an amazing trade or you didn't get the best trade.
Yeah, I mean, I don't do many trades now. I was going to say, I think trading is really common when you're younger because you don't have as much money. And then when you get older, it's just easier to just do everything with a cash value. But yeah, I remember when I was younger, I traded a Mr. Mime, and I think it was an air version, like the jungle one where it doesn't have the symbol. I remember trading that for like a YouTube Black Star promo that some guy got in like a VHS or DVD. And I just never saw it before. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to make that trade. And like today, the Mr. Mime is definitely worth a lot more. But yeah, there weren't any too imbalanced trades back then. Like most were pretty fair. I remember some people, like when you said the thing about Rhydon when Jungle came out, I remember when Fossil dropped, when that was a new set, Golem had like 100, it was like self-destruct or explosion, whatever its attack was. And it was like 100 damage and everybody thought that was a big deal. So I remember people would trade like a Golem that was like an uncommon for like, sometimes even a holo or like a rare because it had like such a big attack. So yeah, those are a couple that I remember from childhood, but nothing too major today. I could probably count all the trades on one hand that I've done in like the past 15 years as an adult. So yeah, nothing too major on the adult end, but yeah, back in the day, there were a lot of trades that happened. Those are a couple that I could think of.
So my experience in the Pokemon community, I bought a couple of cards off of you, I think last year. I've been collecting probably for about 6 years now. I'm not like a high-end collector or anything, mainly Japanese cards. Generally on Instagram is where I find the biggest Pokemon community. And you get a lot of stories about people saying, and, you know, sort of from years ago when this card cost this much money and it was £500. And remember there was a website when I saw the parent Kangaskhan for like £1,500. And it's like, you know, now it's unbelievable. Can you sort of remember or tell me any stories of cards that you picked up for relatively cheap that I don't mean sort of, you know, sort of £10,000 that now cost £100,000. I mean potentially hundreds of dollars or $50 that are relatively cheap that now do cost a small fortune.
Yeah, well, that was going to be one of my examples, like Trophy Kangaskhan. I remember when those used to go about $1,000, and that was actually one of my really big purchases, one of my first big purchases. And of course, like I actually just did one on consignment for $100,000. So you know that's one of the bigger items. But yeah, a lot of the main cards that people go after today, I think the best example are PSA 9 WotC holos. Like you can even go back only about 4 or 5 years. You don't have to go that far back. And most of the PSA 9 Wizards of the Coast holo cards were going for like $30. You know, I remember picking some of them up for like 20 to 30 a piece. And this is in modern times, you know, you don't even have to go all the way back to like the dead era of Pokemon, like in the mid 2000s. But yeah, if you really want to time travel, like I remember buying first edition base Charizards all day for a couple $100 and selling them for like $300 PSA 9 was a big deal. Like, and then they got to $1,000 PSA 9, which was like, you know, balling out of control. So, you know, today, like you can put like a couple zeros on the back of that and, you know, that's what they're going for now. So yeah, we can sit here for hours, but yeah, you don't even have to go that far back, like 5 years, PSA 9 WotC holos, 20 to $30. And yeah, 10 years, 15 years ago, like when there was nobody around, you could pick up pretty much anything with a few $1,000s. You could really get pretty much majority of the, you know, the main set items that were out there.
So on the topic of first edition Charizards, in terms of this new surge of popularity, which Logan Paul seems to have sparked, he has mainly focused on base set and has sort of showcase, Charizard is the ultimate trophy card.
Yes.
And obviously it depends on the collector themselves and what their personal interests are. But really it's a case of there are a lot of other cards that are far more rare than your first edition Charizards, that perhaps a lot of these new fans may not know about and haven't necessarily been educated about. And that's really what I want to sort of talk about, is to be able to introduce these cards to an extent, to show them. So for you, I know your collection is pretty vast and you've had and got the majority of them, but could you tell me and tell my audience a little bit about the other cards that they may not know about, and a bit about their background and what makes them so special?
Yeah, I think the easiest starting point for that is that rare cards aren't from a pack. Like, that's the simplest starting point. The rarest cards are going to be given out at either a tournament, some type of controlled release where they have a limited amount. In Pokemon, we're lucky. I have one sitting over here. This is my lucky University Magikarp. This was only given out in 1998 at the Tamamushi University contest over in Japan. You basically took a quiz or a test for a couple of days, and this was the award you received. So that was the only way it was awarded. And according to documentation, 1,000 was like the intended distribution. But of course, like, we've only seen a fraction of that over 20 years. But that's just one example of a card that is light years rarer than Charizard. And that's not even like the top of the mountain. You have, of course, things like the Illustrator, Pika Trophies, SSB, TMB, Trophy Kangaskhan, like you mentioned earlier, Tropical Wind's another one. I mean, the list goes on. And I think what I've noticed today is that a lot of people find these cards faster than I did. It took me years to discover a lot of this stuff back then. We were talking about the lower prices back in the day. You also had less information and less accessibility. So I see people now in a couple of months figuring out, the rare stuff just simply isn't in a pack. And that's not to knock set cards. Like, I still to this day will always buy and collect them. But yeah, if you're talking strictly rarity, the rare stuff is simply just not in a pack. It's usually a trophy card or Art Academy or something like that has a limited release. And, that was it. That was the only way you can get it. And I think that's like a perfect blend, because in sports and other hobbies, it's a little more contrived, where this is more organic, in my opinion. It's like, oh, this was given out to the world champion, or this was given out like, at that Tamamushi contest in Japan. So that's basically the overview for, a lot of the truly rare stuff. It just you simply won't get it in a pack.
Yeah.
That's the easiest way to say it.
Which one for you is your holy grail, the top of the list, the Illustrator?
Well, that's a really good question. Yeah, I mean, the Illustrator is what a lot of people associate me with. It's really hard to beat that card because it's like the most valuable. But there's a lot, like, for example, this one right here, I always keep it next to me in the videos because it has a great story for me and how I acquired it. But yeah, it's really hard for me to pick just one. I think if I had to fill in that answer, there'd probably be the Illustrator.
Yeah. Could you tell us a bit about the story with the Magikarp, the University Magikarp? Yeah,
sure. So this one, it's gonna be exciting and also frustrating for people, because this is one of the rarest cards in the hobby. But I remember I bought a collection from someone in Japan, and it was like a Masaki set and a lot of, late 90s old back Japanese cards. And I just go through the bulk just to make sure, just to go through and see if like there's any vending promos or any holos that they misplace. And it's organized by color. So I get to the water and I'm going through the water bulk and I see this card staring back at me and I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. So this card was mixed in with the bulk of that collection. And therefore it's my lucky Magikarp. Like a grade PSA 8, like I have a PSA 10 copy. This one will stay with me longer than that PSA 10. So yeah, that one's the lucky Magikarp. And it's just one of those things that I doubt, I've been doing this 15 years. I doubt that'll ever happen again. It shouldn't even happen at all. So yeah, it's a really, really special story.
That's luck. That's real luck.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's the definition of luck. Right there.
Wow.
Yeah.
So obviously the cost of cards going up is a huge part now of the virality of what's been going on. The majority of the news headlines aren't necessarily talking about the number of subscribers, and it's talking about the cost of cards, how much they've gone up by. In that, of course, it's brought in a lot of people that want to make money. people that weren't involved in it before, others that have been. And as a result, it's also brought in scammers to the market. And one of the examples, the biggest one on YouTube, is with this collectibles guru guy. It also brought up the sort of talking point of, could there be other fraudulent items on the market? And if so, is it a reality? I know that others have been stung before, but do you think that there could be other sealed boxes that you can't, unless you open it, you can't confirm its content, that could be on the market?
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking strictly booster boxes, I think majority of them are going to be fine. You're going to see situations like the first edition base. That's by far the biggest offender. I remember PokeRev did a Neo Genesis box, and that one is also a very exceptional situation. But by and large, majority of product is going to be okay. I think the WotC logo, the Wizards of the Coast wrapping around the box, is a good protector. I don't know what Team Rocket's technology is like today, so I don't know, if people could replicate that. But like for the longest time, that's been really the literal and figurative seal of authenticity for that stuff. And that's why, first edition base has a higher tendency of being forged, because it's like the perfect storm, like the most valuable box, only has the clear wrap on there. But for a while, we had a string of them. And ironically, when they were a lot cheaper. And, it's just, again, if that Team Rocket grunt gets fired up and, they decide to do it, it's just a mixture of unknown variables. But again, majority of the time, I think boxes are more than fine. You see people like PokeRev and all these guys who are opening up stuff pretty much every week, every month. And if you do like a statistical analysis on it, it's probably like 99%, of it is fine. It's always just that exception. And of course, you don't want to be in that scenario. But yeah, I would say overall, it's not at a state yet where you really have to like pull the fire alarm and, really worry about every box you purchase.
Sure. Have you ever been stung in the past at all?
I've had a couple issues on eBay, mostly people trying to work the eBay system, which recently they've rectified that. They've gotten a lot better, but, nothing to the extent of like that fake first edition box. With things like, I deal mainly in graded cards and things like that, where it's really ironclad and straightforward. So, I definitely don't deal with as much as guys who, do a lot of box openings, pack openings, and things like that.
Sure. So looking at the impact that YouTube has had recently, the YouTube community has been around for years and years and years. You go back to 10 years, Max Mofo, for instance, has been opening card decks, packs for years, and sort of silently enjoyed it as many people have. But there's an obvious change recently, and Logan Paul seemed to have been that spark. It based on what everyone seems to have said, is that in 2019 it did start to rise. The cost of cards slowly started to sort of rise with the virus when there was a lockdown, and then it's just gone into overdrive more recently. It seemed that Leon Hart, when he opened that Charizard and had the orgasm when when he got the first edition Charizard, that was also a big part, I think. Also hit a lot of headlines across the internet and sort of brought attention to the trading card game. But in terms of looking at the actual impact that YouTube has had on the hobby, do you think that, firstly, what is the impact that you feel it's had for you as a collector, as someone that sells cards? And do you think that the hype can continue? It's pretty much 3 questions I'm asking you here, but
yeah, no, it's okay.
Yeah, it's just going on and on. So really it's in 3 parts. Is what impact has YouTube had? Do you think the hype can continue, and will the prices stay, or will they eventually come back down to where they were?
Yeah, the first 2 are easy. Yeah, for sure. They definitely have some type of influence. I think one of the things people always do in hindsight is they try to point to, moments and attribute the growth to that moment. You saw it in 2016 in Pokemon Go. You saw it with evolutions. People are always pointing to something. Even before that, when Pokemon was very, very small and very insulated, and it wasn't a mainstream thing, you had people that would point to these, what today would be seemingly arbitrary events, and that would be the reason why gold stars were in a bubble or whatever thing was happening. So as for the hardest question of do I think prices will sustain, markets are always in movement, and certain cards are going to have their ebb and flows, going back to rarity and things like that. I talk about all the time. Like my rubric is ultra rare mints or better, because that's basically minimizing the risk of something just having a pitfall. So I think the answer really is just understanding the market and these type of growth cycles or organic traffic, whether it comes in the form of Logan Paul, Pokemon Go, Leon Hart, orgasming over Charizard, pick your poison. Any of these type of things are just going to, you're always going to have this in motion. There's always going to be someone talking about something. Even this video might have some type of effect as well, some micro effect at the end of the day. And, those aren't the reasons why the market is there. We could sit here and talk about things like Beanie Babies or dead hobbies, and it just won't have the same effect. And I think that's my point, is that you need to have that interest at the end of the day for any of this stuff to resonate. And, that's where I think a lot of the people like myself and Gary and others thrive, because we understand the market side of it, and we're able to have a better understanding of, okay, this card is a little bit, overpriced right now because we know the past history and how many are out there, et cetera. So yeah, as for that question, which is a never ending conversation, will these prices sustain? It really depends on the card, really depends on the circumstance, what's going on at PSA, what's the backlog like, there's a lot of variables in there. But overall, yeah, I think YouTube's had an influence, and it can only really have an influence because it has an audience that is engaged, that actually cares at the end of the day. So yeah, I think that's the best way to answer all those three questions.
I think that's a really good answer, because it's in terms of, like as I say, in terms of educating as well. I think that's really good, because for me, that's something I've not heard yet. And like you said, in your last video on your channel, you spoke about Logan Paul, and simply the fact that you could put all the Pokemon YouTubers together, and they still don't have the reach, and they still don't have the size of Logan
Yes.
Paul. So could you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, people severely underestimate. It's weird because they either underestimate Logan Paul or overestimate him. I feel like that's where everyone sits the other day. But he's by far one of the largest influencers, or lack of a better term, out there. It's why people will pay. I know a lot of people in esports, and they quote like the ad revenue that these guys get. And there's companies that pay 50 grand just to say their name in a video, because they had that much market reach and effect. So yeah, it can't be overstated how successful and large Logan Paul is at the end of the day compared to Pokemon. Pokemon's still a niche. We talk about Max Mofo. He's one of my favorite PokeTubers, one of my favorite people in the hobby. Talk to him pretty regularly. And yeah, he's a guy who is a great example. He's been with YouTube for a long time. He's one of the OGs. But yeah, Logan Paul's still on another level, like as far as reach is concerned. So that's definitely going to have an effect. But what's interesting is a lot of people are speculating on the recent Logan Paul opening to be the exact same as the first one. I knew it wouldn't. A lot of people are like, oh, it's going to have this same, 10x on whatever card. And it's not acting the same way. So I think that's more to that larger point that, the market is always in motion, and it's not, even when something can happen again, it's not always binary. It can act differently sometimes. So yeah, I don't know if you wanted that full analysis, but there it is.
That's spot on. I think so. What I'm going to do with a lot of these answers is I'll probably use cutaways. So when you're talking about Logan Paul, I'll cut away to his videos. If I need to cut things down, I can.
Sounds good.
Okay. I think that's perfect, really, in terms of the answer. It's really sort of the last question. Then I've got a few other questions that I'll ask you about that may not go in, but it'd be good to get them for potential cutaways. So the main sort of conclusion that I come to is that it's impossible to predict what will happen in terms of whatever happens. It couldn't necessarily predicted that it would have gone this way. But with all the new people coming in, the one thing that I feel that you can take away from it is everyone's having a great time, and everyone's enjoying and being a part of this community, which already had this great base and this great foundation. And I think that's the main takeaway, for me. There are a lot of people that say, oh, Logan Paul shouldn't have done it. And I know there's been a lot of, I see it a lot in comments on videos, negative towards him. But I don't necessarily view it that way. I think it's being part of any type of collectibles is part and parcel of the nature of it. It can go up in price, and it's just the way it is. But the conclusion is that that yeah, it seems to be that just people are just enjoying it and having a good time. And on YouTube, there's lots of different communities which are quite toxic, and I don't think that's something that the Pokemon community has, and that's what's great about it. But it means so much to so many people. And really, I want to sort of end by asking you, what does Pokemon mean to you and your life and everything that it's done for you in your life? What does Pokemon mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one, because I've done a lot with it, traveled across the land, searching far and wide. I mean, I've done it all, and to like a level that, you know, is unprecedented. Like, I remember when I started, you know, putting together some of these certain cards, like trophies or whatever, graded. To this day, some, you know, no one else has done that. Similar to Gary, you know, it's impossible to replicate what he did with Charizards. So it's really hard to put that into words, because it's a lifelong achievement. And, you know, even where we are now, and, you know, we talk about Logan Paul and all these other people who are in the hobby and things like that. Yeah, no one would have seen that coming, especially this quickly. So it's really tough to put into words, like, you know, what it means to me. All I could say is simply, it just means a lot. And it's basically a huge part of my life. You know, going back like 10 or 15 years, it started as simply just a hobby or something that I enjoyed, and I was just going to investigate that, and just kept snowballing year over year over year. And it's just gotten to a point where, like, you know, even setting up this call was really tough, because I'm constantly busy, you know, dealing with all the things I need to do because of Pokemon. So yeah, it's like fully integrated into my life at this point. So yeah, it's getting close to being almost everything that I do. So yeah, it's really tough to capture the words. It's just definitely a major part of my life, and I don't see that changing in the near future.
So something that I wanted to ask you, I don't know if I'll necessarily have a section about this in the documentary. I'm not sure. I think it might stray away a little bit too much, but I want to get it for safety. Is in terms of collections between you and all the other big dogs in the game, is there any competition? So, for instance, I love Japanese. That's what I like and enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
For me, you have the best collection in the world. Whereas other people might say, well, because Gary's got so many Charizards and they love Charizards. Is there ever a sort of silent competition between you as to who's got the best?
Not really. You know, I try to steer away from that, because it does get into this weird pissing contest that I personally don't think of it that way. I think at the end of the day, it's just a result of passion. Like, you can see the actual cards are just a result of effort and passion. And yeah, it's like what I was mentioning before. It's like, all this is uncharted territory. You know, no one went this hard before, and, you know, you have to replicate that, which I don't think is possible at this point. You know, even if you have unlimited money, even if you're like a Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk or somebody, you simply can't locate a lot of these cards. You know, I have cards that I've had the single only PSA9 copy ever, like in the history of man, you know? So there's certain cards, even if you have billions of dollars, I don't think you can find them, or at least easily locate them, because there's such a barrier there with Japan, where, you know, not trying to knock people who just do English, but it's much easier. You know, doing English is much easier, because I have a lot of that stuff too. Charizards, I have all the English trophies as well. And it's much easier because I can just go reach out to a winner. You know, I can go through the grapevine. It's just a matter of, do I want to pay this price? Where the thing with the Japanese stuff is that not only is there more rarity and more variety out there, there's that inherent barrier of language, culture, country, distance, everything, where you just can't simply reach out to someone and say, hey, you know, do you have this card, or how much do you want for this? You know, you can't really do that. So yeah, it's one of those things where I think we all have our own like identity, and I know mine's definitely like the strongest Japanese. But yeah, as far as like greatest or most valuable, it'd be really tough. I don't even know what mine is worth at this point, because I don't treat it that way. It's just a result of like my passion. Like, I got that thing, put it over here, I got this thing. Okay, moving on to the next thing. So yeah, that's how I treat it anyway.
Yeah, interesting. One of the other ones I wanted to talk about is Pokemon Snap cards. Kind of doesn't seem to be that well known in terms of people that might be similar to myself, you know, have collected for many years, but not heavily. but don't necessarily know about them. Where do they rank in terms of rarity and trying to acquire?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, they're definitely very rare. They're up there for sure as far as rarity is concerned. I always use them as a poster child of something that's too rare in the sense that it doesn't transact enough. So when one does appear for sale, a lot of people are reluctant because they want some type of data point. You know, when an auction hits a record, everyone now feels comfortable spending that price. I mean, I had that happen with the Trophy Kangaskhan. I remember someone did one PWCC, and literally a minute later, I got an identical offer to that auction. So that's the struggle with the snap cards, is they are exceptionally rare. I think they're very cool. I wish they would have made a little bit more of them, or at least the big brain move would have been to do like a full 63 card set, like a Snap Charizard, Muse, like the secret rare or something like that. But yeah, they're definitely rare, but they are unfortunately too rare and also only given to one person outside the extra copies. So therefore, there's just not enough sales data, and it's hard to create interest and get, make people aware of them when they just simply don't appear. And I also have similar cards like that, like the 2001 Tropical Wind, I think fits that category as well. It just doesn't appear enough. So it's really hard to educate people on it when you can't point to like a public auction or anything and say, oh yeah, here's this snap card or whatever card. So yeah, I think that's basically they're very rare, but unfortunately they're too rare and they don't sell often enough.
Your impact early on, do you think that you were the pioneer that effectively started this trend of the rarer cards being and costing so much, especially with what you did initially with the PSA 9 Illustrator? I'm not sure what year it was, but quite a long time ago now, and putting it up for so much that it was actually part and parcel of why cards are where they are today, especially the trophy cards.
Yeah, it definitely had influence for sure. When you're trying to, it's kind of like we were talking about before with whether it's Logan Paul, Pokemon Go, or all these moments of exposure in the hobby. I still treat it as just a result of passion. Me buying those illustrators, selling illustrators, trophies, whatever it was. I just really like that stuff. And, coming from sports and other hobbies, I see how it's much more organic in Pokemon in that it's only given out at a tournament. Usually the art reflects that in some way versus like the one-to-one Jumpman patch auto type deal in sports that is designed by a company to be rare. So yeah, I mean, I think it's the combo of just, all the things we've talked about. And I'm certainly one of the market makers for those cards. And I think there's definitely a lot of people out there who create interest or create markets from that interest. But again, I think the fundamental root in all this is just simply passion and basically showcasing these cards. And, if you like them and you want to go after them, feel free. If not, don't. That's always been my perspective. But yeah, I am definitely aware that my like residual enjoyment or passion has effects on other people. And, that's really all I ever intended was just to talk about, what I really enjoyed. And I feel like there's a lot of other people out there who would as well, because I didn't start with those cards. I started with what I grew up with. And then when I discovered them, it was like the allegory of the cave. I remember seeing those cards and it just blew my mind. I'm like, what is this stuff? Like, what is this artwork that I've never seen before? So yeah, I think there's a lot of other people who have definitely echoed that experience, and sure, partly because of me and other people who just shared that passion. I really think that's the universal truth there for all that.
Cool, sure. So did you ever, this is more of a personal question too, did you ever, after you sort of left school, did you come away from Pokemon, or was it always there in terms of you collecting?
Yeah, I didn't do it in high school. Was like definitely trying to be a cool guy, just typical teenage crap. And I did do Pokemon. I actually got back into it early in college because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know what I wanted to study. And I just basically would look up things from the past because I think nostalgia, kind of like what's going on now, or at least in 2020, nostalgia was on the rise because people were looking for a better time. And I think that's normal. And that's basically what I was doing back then is, I really didn't know what my future was going to be. And I just started doing this stuff on the side in Pokemon, a little bit of sports and other things. And I started just buying doubles of cards and selling that to get another card. And it really, snowballed into what I am doing now. So yeah, I did take a break, but what got me back in was basically just not knowing what I wanted to do. And yeah, that was the timeline, like basically 15 years ago now. So yeah, there was a pause there for sure.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's it's kind of weird because I think for most of us that grew up with it as well, it's kind of the same thing. And I remember when I kind of first started getting back into it, I remember probably when I was 20, so you're going about 10 years ago now, I remember saying, I just want to get a Charizard. I never had a Charizard other than the one that I swapped for a bloody Rhydon. You know, so I just wanted to get it. And then eventually, you know, it never happened, then came back into it. And similar to you, you know, you start finding all ththese cards and it's just like, wow, where did I mean, the first time I saw the Kangaskhan parent trophy card, I couldn't believe it. I was like, what? And then seeing it for 1,500, I thought to myself, wow. And it turned out that was an old website. So I thought, good deal here. But yeah, it's a special thing. It means a lot to a lot of people. And I hope that with this documentary, I want to try and make it a bit more fun. I don't want to make it all about statistics, but hopefully can kind of bring that love and that spirit of what everyone enjoys about it back, hopefully, to people, my audience, and kind of hopefully get that across. So that's the plan. But I think that's everything, Scott. That's really, honestly, thank you so much for for giving me time and for all your answers as well. I think they're perfect.